So I went to the SBC convention this last week, and
I didn't.
You didn't go?
No.
Yeah. I've decided that we could fight over just about anything.
You and me?
Baptist.
Oh, well, we're both Baptists.
Yeah, so you and I could fight over just about anything.
I don't want to fight you, Robert. You scare me.
I mean, literally, we could write a sentence and change one word, and we could fight over it.
You're assuming that a Baptist can write a sentence. Some of us can.
Did you pass English Lit?
Yeah. I took a Shakespeare class. Really enjoyed that.
Did you like Shakespeare when you were younger?
No. Only when I got older. Don't know why. I don't know. Maybe my brain's matured. Maybe I lost more brain cells. I don't know.
So you lost brain cells?
Yeah.
And that helped
Well,
you
as you naturally age, you lose brain cells. So I'm okay with it.
I'm okay
with it.
I
I think maybe if I was a Christian when I was younger, I might have been like Lutheran or something. Now I've lost brain cells, so now I'm a Baptist. Makes sense.
You would have started out in the more higher ecclesiastical orders.
Yes.
But as you've lost brain cells, you made your way down to...
Yeah, and I'm almost a Methodist.
Well, you would have been Northern Baptist, General Baptist,
High Baptist,
Southern Baptist.
Well, it's kind of appropriate, right?
You've been to the bottom of the rung.
So how did the convention go, Robert?
Oh, man. You know, there were some parts of it that were encouraging and some parts of it that were highly discouraging.
Gotcha.
So
I was discouraged just being at home and looking at all the Twitter feeds where it seems like just about everybody was upset.
What kind of things did you see on Twitter?
Oh, like how do we elect Lytton president? How could this happen? We're going to have a split within 10 years. I saw that was on one of the posts. Just generally, neither side was happy. It seems like there's two sides now, and neither side was happy with anything that went on. It didn't seem like there was much positive coming out of the convention this year.
There was one post that said, Southern Baptist Convention will vote to approve homosexuality in the next 10 years.
It's sad that, I'm assuming that's a pastor, probably, that a pastor that sits under that denomination feels that way.
Yeah, I may not agree with all of the decisions that we've made, but I would find that hard to believe.
Yeah, because up until now, they've looked into any allegations like that, right? If that's the doctrine that's being taught, they've removed those churches from the convention.
And well, I mean, we're still strongly against it. I mean, that's not even on the table.
That's right. In my mind, even with everything that's going on, what I think is normal for a denomination, any denomination, we're still the best denomination when it comes to correct theology. Not perfect, but the best.
Yeah, our problem seems to be that we don't know how to practice our theology.
Yeah.
We struggle to take our theology and then apply that theology.
But that's kind of the beauty of the Baptist tradition, where each church is independent.
Yeah, we're autonomous.
Yeah. I mean, that's how it was designed. So by the nature of the way it was designed, there's going to be conflict. There's no way around it.
Yeah. Which was, I think, wise on their part.
Yeah, I do too.
To not have the ecclesiastical order. Yeah,
I think that's why the SBC has held the line for as long as it has, because of the way it is designed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is there a bureaucracy? Yes.
Oh, definitely.
Is it politically motivated in some instances about people trying to elevate themselves? Probably so. I wouldn't specifically point any one person out, but I think that by the nature of a bureaucracy, that's what happens.
Yeah, I think we saw some of that bureaucracy come out in the fact that Adams only received 600 votes. So, I mean, the fact that he didn't have any big name person that was promoting him.
Now, I don't know much about him. So why would you have voted for him? What was his case for being president?
For me, I liked him because he was one of the three candidates that was kind of in the background. And so he wasn't one of the...
Small church?
He's in Northwest. He's a executive director of one of the states in Northwest.
Gotcha.
And so his platform was more on transparency, accountability, external audits, external reviews.
Yeah.
So all the stuff that everybody wanted, it's just that nobody knew him. I mean, he's in the middle of nowhere. We don't have a lot of churches up there. There's not a lot of Baptist up there, so there's not a lot of people to vote for him. He's never been in a major office before. So.
Yeah, it is popularity driven, just like any race would be for a seat such as president.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with those premises. I for one would like to see more accountability and open transparency when it comes to budget items. In other words, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, the annual report will show how much was given out in salaries, but it won't show individual salaries within that group or division of the SBC. Is that correct?
That is correct. And there was even an attempt to pass stricter, whatever you want to call it, stricter control, so that if you wanted to know what a, say, seminary president made, you would have to submit that to the seminary, and then that seminary would make the decision if they wanted to give that information to you.
So that's not transparency.
But that didn't pass.
Yeah.
So that motion was voted down almost unanimous by the messengers of the Southern Baptist Convention.
Sure.
And so we did not give that power to the executive committee, along with a number of other things that was in that motion that we didn't like. Gotcha. And so that, for me, that's a difficult one, because I think there needs to be a certain amount of transparency in the terms of, I don't think our SBC presidents and things should be making $500,000.
Is that what they make?
I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
If they did,
yeah,
I'm not saying that they do or anything like that. But at the same time, I think where pastors need to be careful is you can't demand something from a seminary president or a professor or something that you're not willing to do yourself.
That's right.
So can the pastor down the street call your church and say, hey, how much does your pastor make? And then I had a pastor friend that I asked that, and he said, well, it's different because, they don't give to my church. I'm like, well, do you use the resources that go from the cooperative program? Because if you do, then yes, they do give to your church.
So here's the difference to me. I would not personally attend a church where I didn't know what the staff made. And I'm a staff at the church. I would not give my money towards that.
Yeah.
If I'm giving to a church that is involved in the cooperative program, I don't have a choice.
Yeah.
I can't tell if they're spending their money wisely or being good stewards of the money, God's money, and using it properly. And by the nature of a bureaucracy, they tend to get bloated pretty easy through no fault of anybody. It just they tend to grow and become bloated in that way. So that's something that does need to be safeguarded against. And what's wrong with an audit? An independent audit to make sure the money's going where it should be going, right?
So we need to know if they're making pastor money or not.
Senior pastor money. I'm sure they are.
They can afford that scooter. So one of the cool things about Nashville was the scooters, by the way.
Oh.
So we got down there.
Did you bring any back with you?
No, well, they make really, really loud noises if you move them when they're not supposed to be moved.
They're alarmed, huh?
Yeah, it would be very embarrassing trying to sneak one of those into your car.
Well, Nashville's kind of a crazy city. My wife and I visited it last year, and some guy almost ran her over while we were trying to cross the street. So,
oh, wow.
A little dangerous there.
Well, it was $40 to park your car.
Yeah.
Or you could hop on these little scooters that go like 20 miles an hour. And
Did you do that?
Really fun. And it's only like $4.
Yeah.
So my friend and I would just drive those everywhere we went.
Nashville has the highest motel rate of any city in the United States. I learned that last year as I was booking.
Really?
Very expensive. Yeah.
I will say this. Don't rent a scooter and get coffee.
Oh, okay.
Your hand will be stained.
Oh, so you spilled your coffee. You're no better on a scooter than you are in just normal everyday life.
This is true. Now, the nice thing is I've got big enough hands that I could hold my coffee and still grip the brake. My friend did not have the same.
He's got kind of small, stubby little hands.
Yeah. So we were going down a hill, and he just starts screaming because he doesn't know how he's going to stop. and there was cars in front of us.
So he didn't think this through ahead of time.
No.
Okay.
And there's pedestrians everywhere.
So maybe my theory about Southern Baptists and brain cells is correct. Then maybe you're proving my theory.
He would be a good case study for you. Yeah.
He's not an outlier, maybe.
So everyone's laughing at us. Well, laughing at him. I was laughing so hard that I had to pull over and stop so that I could laugh because his coffee is going everywhere and he's about ready to wreck. And we're going 25, 30 miles an hour down this hill towards a busy intersection.
Starbucks coffee? Was this like $8?
This was good coffee.
Oh, okay. It's expensive.
It's 50 cents for every
every spill. Well, that's not being a good steward of God's money then, for sure.
No, probably not. So there was just a number of things at the convention this year that everybody was, lots of tension in the room, especially over the resolutions. Of course, in 2019, they passed the resolution to accept CRT as a helpful tool, and then everything. Of course, at the time, nobody even knew what CRT was.
I was going to say, explain to the audience what a CRT is.
CRT, depending on who you ask, is a way of evaluating race, equality, oppression, and there are some that say it is an analytical tool. There are some that say it is a worldview. I personally think that it is a worldview by the way that it works. And so I tend to agree a little bit more with Vodi Bakum on that it is a worldview. And
the worldview where it shames a white person? Does it go to that extreme?
The worldview where in and of itself, it becomes racist.
Okay.
And so I don't see it as being something that's going to solve racism, even if at some points you may be able to. I think Danny Aiken said at the 9 Marks thing that CRT is not a worldview that we need to accept, but there may be some truths within it that we could pull out of it.
Separate more than it unites?
I would say yes. I even had lunch with someone the other day from Nigeria that was walking me through the damage that it's doing to his country.
In Africa.
And so
this is a worldview. It's not just localized to the United States then.
No, actually his argument was that it's doing more damage there than it is here.
Is that why you think Vodi Bakum is so strong against CRT?
Actually, that in that moment, that's what I said to him. I said, that makes sense to me why Vodi is so adamant that we just hammer this CRT thing into the ground and pour as much water on this fire as possible, because Vodi's in, for the audience that doesn't know, Vodi Bakum is president of a Christian seminary there.
In Africa.
Yeah, in Nigeria.
Yeah.
And so that those things started to make sense to me for why Vodi, because I knew he was there, but I didn't realize that the feminism movement and those things that were taking place in Nigeria until I was talking to this friend. And so then
it's causing division within Nigeria, and in what ways?
So he said that the CRT movement has caused a feminism movement where it is drastically increased the divorce rate. It has drastically increased the number of women who have no interest in getting married, and so it is increased sexual promiscuity without the marriage. And so it's breaking. I think his terminology was it's breaking down the moral fabric of family. Gotcha. It's destroying family.
Yeah.
Which in our country has already happened.
Right.
So we're not seeing that because that already took place in the 70s and the 80s. So there's no need for that to.
Well, it sounds like it's starting to work in other ways, such as dividing the SBC.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. We're just seeing now as I think Vodi talks about in his book, the applied aspect of that.
Because I remember last year you came back from the convention and you started talking about CRT. I'm like, I don't even know what that is. Hadn't even heard of it before that. So this has been a year-long process to get up to this point.
Yeah. So then in 2019, we vote on this resolution that talks about CRT as being a analytical tool. Mm-hmm. So then that throws Southern Baptists, once they go home and they study it and they figure out what it is, then that throws a certain number of Southern Baptists up in arms on one end.
Including the seminaries who came out against it.
Came out against
all
it.
6 seminaries, right? Is
All
that right?
6, yep.
Yeah.
All 6 presidents signed a thing that they're against that.
Including our alma mater, Midwestern Baptist.
Signed it. Yep.
Dr. Allen.
Dr. Allen. And then Albert Mohler, who was just running
Uh-huh.
for president this year of our convention, who is also the president of the Southern Seminary. And then also that brought about the Dallas Statement. So Dallas Baptist Theological Seminary,
Right.
Bodie Bauckham and a number of others signed a statement which came out against CRT. Because of that, there was then some within our convention who left because they felt like taking that strong of a stance against CRT was a form of racism in and of itself.
So these were pro-CRT that decided to leave the SBC because of the Dallas Statement.
So that's the part for me that's kind of confusing is whether or not those individuals are pro-CRT or if they are afraid that a full condemnation of CRT will stop the discussion
It
of
will
race.
deny any racism at all ever
Yeah.
occurred, which we all know is wrong.
Correct.
Right.
Because racism is real,
Yes.
which
And the history of the Southern Baptist Convention is not real great when it comes
No.
to that. But
that's right.
Yeah.
1995 was the first time we even apologized
That's
for our
right.
role in racism.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
And so for me, that's where that gets kind of sticky. I know.
Yeah. Yeah, who knows the real reason? And that's a complaint we keep hearing about, for instance, Litton being
Mhm.
elected, that, he's maybe not as conservative as, say, Albert Mohler or what was the other guy's name? Mike
Stone.
And now we're on this slippery slope where, like you said, we're going to allow women in the pulpit.
Yep.
Homosexuality is going to be allowed, things
Yep.
like that, right?
Yeah, because that was the complaint against Litton, is that he did a sermon series where
Right.
his wife joined him on the platform and preached with him. And so you had guys like Tom Askell and Tom Buck who came out very strong against Litton because women shouldn't preach, which I would agree women shouldn't preach.
Yep.
We've already
By
done
the
a
way,
podcast on that.
I watched the clip, and I know women shouldn't preach, but I thought she actually preached a little bit better than her husband.
Yeah.
A little more convicting there, but
And we thought there was something in that first sermon that was almost more egregious than the fact that she was preaching. And
within
that
the
was,
first 5 sentences.
Yeah. And what was it exactly that?
He said something about what in God's name.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
To kids graduating from
Right.
high school. Oh, he was talking about kids growing up too fast. And he was talking about parents who time flies by and you're all of a sudden your kid's graduating from high school. And as a parent, you go, what in
Right.
has happened? And
Which my initial thought when I first heard this was a couple of days ago. I thought, well, that's like blaspheming God's name was my first impression.
Yeah.
And then I said, well, listen to it and tell me what you think,
And I looked at it and I thought to myself, well, I would never even say that in casual conversation,
much less from a pulpit.
let alone would I say that from the pulpit. There's no way I would say that from the pulpit.
Right.
And
by the way, one of your pet peeves is the sermon series where 4 ways to do this or 4 ways that. That's what this first sermon was 4 ways to have a better marriage or have a better family. And I thought, that's a little weak sauce from an SBC president, in my opinion.
I cannot stand self-help sermons. I'm sorry. And listen, I did some research. This President Litton sounds like a really nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
He seems very genuine.
Good intentions.
Seems like he's got great intentions.
A man of God.
A man of the and a man of the word. Even
Okay.
I mean, I don't want to be so petty. I thought. And I'll defend him on this point. So I've called him out on 2 points that I think are serious accusations. You've brought your wife on the stage to preach, which I think is wrong.
Which is another dividing factor within the SBC.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think you've violated one of the 10 Commandments
Maybe so.
in a sermon.
Maybe. Yeah.
Now I will defend him on this though. There were some what do they call it? Tweeting or twittering or whatever they call it. I don't do it that much. So I don't know what the technical terminology is.
Tweet.
They were tweeting about how on his webpage he had bad terminology for the Trinity.
Okay.
And I thought that was kind of...
What, like a bad illustration or
no,
what?
just the wording of it. They called him out that the wording of it wasn't what it should have been, that it could be taken to not be solid theologically, that it could lead to a false
Yeah, that would be a problem if
Trinitarian belief.
If that's true and he really believes that.
He changed it.
Okay.
The second it was pointed out. And I thought to myself, especially in a church his size, but even in a church our size, our website is oftentimes out of date.
Yeah, with problems.
We do our very best.
Yeah.
But it's the website.
Yeah.
No offense, but...
And you got to give him a right to defend what he really believes.
And a right to change it once the mistake is pointed out.
And also, I will say this. I've only watched a half a sermon by him.
Yes.
And that's not definitely representative of his whole body of work either. No. So that's not fair, to judge somebody off one sermon.
Yeah, he could be a very good preacher. I'm just those two things. Preaching with your wife, for me, no, can't do it. And using the Lord's name in vain in a sermon. Sorry.
At the very least, even if you think women can preach from the pulpit, if you're in his position within the SBC and you know it's divisive,
you shouldn't do it.
Then why would you do it? Because that's going to cause problems and people to stumble.
Well, it's already going to be an issue because we just sent Saddleback Church to the credentials committee.
You told me that. So this was voted on by the messengers. And why? Why did they vote for that again?
So they ordained 3 women to pastoral ministry.
Right before Rick Warren retired.
Correct. Convenient.
So which I thought was kind of ironic, the timing
which
of it
we
all.
also did a video on, if you'd like to watch that.
And so they're going to be looked at by the SBC to decide whether they can continue being in the convention or not.
Yeah, so they'll credentials committee will recommend to the convention next year whether or not that is a church in good standing.
Gotcha.
And if they're found to not be in good standing by violating the Baptist faith and message, then we would vote to disfellowship with them.
Which puts Litton in an awkward position because he has done the exact same thing, in essence, by letting her preach on a Sunday morning.
That would be the argument.
So then he would probably be...
Yeah. So that could be an interesting convention in and of itself if that is the scenario that sets up for itself.
So I heard the sentiment that a lot of pastors on either side of the other believe there's going to be a split within 10 years. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I think a split in our convention is difficult. So you take the Methodist Church, and a split can be worked out a little more easier, if that would be good terminology to use, because they can just take their assets and divide them and say, you get these 50%, you these 50%. But we're autonomous churches.
Right.
So who gets to pick the 50%?
So if the SBC is probably down in giving, I'm guessing, this last year with COVID and all the other things going on.
We lost 500,000 members.
Oh, wow. So that's a lot.
Yeah.
So churches will vote with their pocketbooks, right? Yep. I mean, that's where it's going. And that could cause potential problems within the SBC.
Yeah, well, so Ronnie Floyd gave his report, and in his report, he spent a large portion of it really asking us to give more money to the cooperative program because the giving from churches in general was so far down.
So I've only been a Christian for 7 or 8 years, and when I went into college and then seminary at a Baptist Midwestern, I constantly heard how good the cooperative program is, how you got to get, this is a constant refrain from the leaders within the convention. And I always thought as a new Christian or a fairly new Christian, I'm like, well, what's wrong here? If we're in touch, if our relationship with God is such as an individual and as a church, that should really compel us, not asking, not getting up on a platform and saying, we need money. To me, that just almost drives me away from wanting to give them money in a way,
Yeah, you would think that the mission is so of the Lord. Right. We just look at that and go, I have to give to that.
I want to be a part of that.
Which is what it used to be.
Yeah.
But I think the problem now is we spend so much time fighting and we spend so much time disagreeing that there is no time spent on the mission. I mean, I sat next to two kids during the convention, during part of it, And they were probably early to mid 20s, I would say.
Young bucks.
Young. Yep. And it was during Ronnie Floyd's sermonette, speech, whatever it was,
Right.
asking for money, Vision 2025. And I was talking to them about what Ronnie was talking about, and they didn't even know that our cooperative program dollars went to NAM.
Gotcha.
And then they didn't even know that Litton had preached with his wife. The only thing they knew was that their pastor had told them to come to the convention and vote for him.
Yeah.
And outside of that, they didn't know anything about how the convention worked, or how NAM worked, or how the IMB worked, or any of it. And so as I'm sitting there trying to explain all this stuff to them, here's two guys, they're getting ready to go plant churches in our convention, and we're getting ready to send a whole bunch of money to them, and they don't even know where the money's coming from.
Yeah.
So when they go plant these churches, they're not going to convince their churches to send money to something that they don't even know anything about.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there going, well, no wonder our churches aren't giving money when, so the whole Ronnie Floyd thing was 5,000 churches by 2025. And I'm thinking to myself, if these are the guys planting the churches,
it's not going to work.
Heaven help us.
Yeah.
Because...
Well, that is a good reason to share this video, right? Because this is a good jumping off point for if you're in the Southern Baptist Convention. Share this with another Southern Baptist member, because the average person within a congregation has no idea what their percentage of their tithing is going to. It's for instance, most of them do not know that they're actually funding the seminaries to a certain degree by giving the money to their cooperative program.
Yeah, so Richard and I are graduates, alma maters, Midwestern, and of the budget that we approved, they received, I think it was somewhere between $7 and $8 million.
Yeah.
And so of the money that we send...
Just to Midwestern?
Just to Midwestern.
Gotcha. One of the six.
Yeah, and that's determined by how many students they have. And so the number of enrollment you have determines how much of the cooperative program dollars. I believe that's how that works.
That's why they want to blow this doctoral program up, huh? Get as many PhD students in as they can.
So it's the fastest growing one in the United States.
Wow, interesting. Okay.
It was the only reason I got in.
Let's make it more. I don't think that's true. I think you could have got in a lot of programs.
And so our money goes to that. It goes towards 6,000 missionaries that are on the field across the world.
That's always been the biggie, right?
Yes.
That's the one you don't want to not give money, because we are funding those. Although some could argue that we don't evangelize here stateside anymore. And
that's why baptisms are so
yeah, because wasn't there a plan for baptisms also? What was that plan that was outlined? Was that Ronnie Floyd also?
Yep, that was Ronnie Floyd's 2025. And so his plan at first that he proposed was that we would reach 17-year-olds from now until 2025, which isn't bad.
So we don't care about the 18 or 16-year-olds, just the 17-year-olds have more. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, yeah.
That makes a lot of sense to me. As somebody in youth ministry, that makes sense. I'll just focus on 17-year-olds this coming Sunday.
Our kids will be sad.
yeah, because we don't have very many 17. Sorry, kids, you just need to go home unless you're 17. Oh, sorry, I'm being facetious. Go ahead.
And so someone came to the floor and made a motion that we just make the 2025 vision for everyone under the age of 18.
Oh, okay, that makes some sense.
And so we just don't care about senior adults. No big deal. So anyway,
that's where the money is. SBC is in the senior adults. Go ahead.
So all kidding aside, there was a push because where we've seen a lot of our baptisms really decline has been in that under 18 and under range. And so really making a push to try and reach our younger generations again with the gospel. And so that was mixed with 500 church plants, 200 replants, and then also 100 multi-sites, gotcha. I believe, per year was the goal there. And so really pushing for, because I do believe that if you look at the numbers, a church plant is far more likely to baptize somebody than an established church.
Yes, what do?
Evangelize,
which makes no sense for the push for 17 and under, because I got news for you. Those kids are not coming to church unless their parents bring them. Which means you need to be evangelizing to all ages, not just to 17. Go ahead, I digress.
Well, and that my soapbox on that would be that we've treated the gospel like magic.
Oh,
That the younger you are, the more likely you are to believe in it. I mean, how ridiculous does that sound? That hey, the younger you are, the more likely you are to believe in Jesus.
well, we discussed this. I believe the more likely you are to be baptized, because I believe a lot of those kids that are baptized aren't actually saved. They don't really understand what sin is yet, or the complications of that, and the purpose of a savior. I think that's missed sometimes.
Yeah. So just so we're clear, the gospel is not any less likely to save a 40-year-old man than it is to save a 12-year-old boy.
Right.
It's equal for both.
That's right.
So
The thing is, we've got to get out there and do that face to face, person to person. We can't just be an example. That doesn't work. They have to hear the word. They have to understand it. God does the rest. It's our job to tell them, but that needs to be done. And from what I've seen, that isn't done very often by very few people.
yeah, we can't just what did St. Francis of Assisi say? What was his famous saying?
Preach the word, or
share the gospel,
There you
use
go.
words if necessary.
if necessary. Right. That's
that couldn't
preposterous.
be any more false.
Right. That just doesn't work.
You can't share the gospel without using words.
That's right. And it's probably been a long-term problem with not only the SBC, but a lot of churches where they just got out of the habit of doing this for whatever reason. I'm not sure why, but it's definitely not being done. Very small percentage.
There are less and less people in our country getting saved for a reason.
Yes.
And it's not because the gospel has lost power.
It's not because it's lost power, and the message is probably just as strong or stronger now than what it was 20 years ago by virtue of what's going on in society.
Yeah.
These kids are hungering for this.
Yeah.
The adults are too. But you also said something interesting. So they want to also fund satellite churches. So how's that going to work? That's the first I've ever heard of that.
So they didn't go into that, but that was interesting because when he brought that up, funding 100 satellite churches, he didn't unpack that for us.
So what is a satellite church? What's the definition of a satellite church?
So my understanding of a satellite church is where you go to a building and you watch on a screen what is happening at another building.
Gotcha.
Where they're having physical worship where the preacher actually is.
Okay, so the preacher isn't physically present in that church. He's up on a screen.
Yeah, it's casted up onto it.
So not very many churches would do this. This would be a very small percentage of churches in the United States that would actually have a satellite church.
Correct.
Okay.
And so that got me to thinking. I thought, okay, so 100 of those a year. Well, there's not a lot of churches that can afford the technology that it takes to do that kind of a multi-site.
Right.
Which would mean we're going to give money to churches that already have the money to do a multi-site.
So they have the financial means to rent another space, put a screen up, and project a live stream into it. Plus hire another pastor typically in that area to be the what do they call those? The campus pastor. That's right. So that would take a wealthy church. And if you think 100 of them, that's 2 for every major city. I mean, that's a lot of churches.
Yeah, so I don't know how that's going to work out, and I don't want to put words into Ronnie Floyd's mouth or anything like that. But
it's interesting, though.
If that means giving money to these churches that are already like running 1,000, that are usually the ones doing multi-site, I'm not in favor of that. That doesn't.
Because I did a mission trip in Wyoming on a reservation a few years ago where absolutely no SBC money was going in. I had pastors, local pastors there saying, we're trying to plant a church here, but we're not being funded. They don't care about us in this area. Don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I heard.
Yeah, let's send some money there.
Yeah.
So that's why
a lot of 17 and unders in Wyoming.
That's why.
Sorry.
Why can't I think of his first name? I keep wanting to say Nate Adams, who is the president of our convention, but
Illinois.
It was Adams was his last name, but he was running for president for
Grizzly Adams.
Grizzly Adams. We'll call him that. But that's why he was running, because he's from that region.
Okay.
And he wants recognition for those churches that are not necessarily part of the Bible Belt.
Yeah.
Which I agree with him in that the Southern Baptists, we pulled the DOMs out of those regions. We pulled the executive directors out of those regions. We pulled the funding out of those regions. And so the most lost region of the United States, and we as Southern Baptists have pulled our funding out of there. That makes zero sense.
A common theme I saw on Twitter this week were small church pastors saying the SBC has lost touch and they don't care about the small churches. I saw that over and over and over. So the general feeling is there. I even saw one that said, we could survive without the SBC, but they can't survive without us. I saw that a couple of times. So that was interesting.
On the drive home, I was telling my friend that the part of this that didn't shake out at the convention this year, or didn't shake out yet. So you had 16,000 approximately messengers at the convention. So, but when you think about that, if you account for pastors and their wives as messengers from one church.
Did you take Hannah with you?
No. I took her to one convention. She hated it.
Okay.
So the business part.
You didn't take her out and get her good food while you were?
Well, I did, but then typical
Hannah.
Her blood starts boiling when they start fighting.
Oh, no.
She just kind of looks at it like, what these are supposed to be Christian people and they're acting like this.
Gotcha. Yeah. This would have been a bad one to take her to then.
And she's right. I mean, this would have been a bad one. That was her first question when I got home was, how they kill each other. But if you think you've got a pastor-wife combo, two messengers from the same church, right? So let's just assume that you've got a pretty good number of those. So let's take 16,000. Let's say you have 6,000 wives that went. So now we're down to 10,000 churches represented. So let's say that you have about 4,000 messengers that also came doubles from the same church.
Sure, which happens a lot.
Yep. So now you're down to about 8,000 churches that are represented. Well, we have 41,000, I think, or something like that, churches that are represented in our convention.
Less than a quarter. Wow.
So how many of the churches that didn't go to the convention thought what took place was a bunch of hogwash?
Yeah.
And are
a lot
going
of
to
those
say
pastors couldn't afford to go. Either they don't have the funds or they're bivocational. Right?
And their CP giving just went right out the window.
That's right.
So that's
which adds up.
I know that's the part I think that's going to begin to trickle down, and I think we saw it at this convention when they started really, really pushing for money and asking for us to increase our giving. I mean, that was Ronnie Floyd's thing. Who can give 10% more? And if you don't give a percent, who can give 10% more than the dollar amount they're already allocating? And who can give this money? It was a real strong push for money. Well, you're only doing that if there's a money problem.
Right.
And we already saw that Lifeway, partially because of the pandemic, had to sell one of their most precious properties just so they could stay alive. Well, these small churches who don't feel like their voice can be heard are going to make their voice heard.
That's right.
And so we'll see how this kind of shakes out over the next 6 months to a year, because they may just say, we really don't care about your investigations. We don't care about what you do with what president, because there's going to be some of these small churches in the middle of nowhere that when they find out you elected a president that preaches with his wife, they're just going to go, we're done.
Well, and some people might not know this, but the vast majority of churches are under 100 in congregation with the SBC.
Yeah.
It's almost all of them, honestly.
So we'll see what happens. So last thing I wanted us to talk about is what do we do if, let's say, a church decides, all right, we're done being Southern Baptists. Is it important for a church to be a part of a cooperation of other churches? How important is that?
Well, we discussed this a little bit earlier, right? You were citing Book of Acts, how there seemed to be networks or Philippian churches, Ephesian churches, things like that. So it seems, and I thought maybe, there's a contextual case to say that's a different time. Those churches had to do that to grow. But it does seem to be important that we band together, especially along denominational lines. I'm not a big fan of oh, we need to get along with this church if they're so far off
Yeah.
from us
Yeah.
theologically that it makes no sense. They're not even telling the gospel message. But
Yeah.
there does seem to be a need for us to band together along denominational lines, right?
Yeah. I think that the cooperation for the gospel is important, because in some ways, if there wasn't the cooperation for the gospel in the book of Acts in chapter 15, then there becomes a great hindrance for the gospel.
Sure.
Because when that theological problem arose in Acts chapter 15 when they had the council, it would have been very difficult for them to handle that.
Right.
But because there was a group of churches that were in agreement that they were going to cooperate together for the sake of the gospel, they came to a theological agreement on those issues and said, here's where we stand. And then they sent messengers out to the churches to say, here's what we believe.
Some of those churches were pretty messed up too,
Yeah.
right? Some of them we would look at today and go, oh, it looks like our church.
Yeah. It looks like our own problems that we're in today.
Right. Yeah.
Which I think, and as frustrated as I get, it's almost a reminder that if they could have those kinds of problems in the first century in the Church of Acts, is it really any surprise to us that?
No. And the SBC's done some great things, especially with missionaries overseas. It took a cooperation like that to be able to do what they did.
They said that this year, I think they said that this year, that we will break $20 billion spent on missionaries.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
$20 billion.
Hey, there's some of those missionaries, they get off a boat on a river and they just go 50 miles that way until they run into a tribe. There's no plan other than we're going to intercept a tribe that's never heard the gospel message before.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing stuff, honestly.
And they're translating. I've got some friends that graduated from Midwestern. They're translating Bibles into languages that it's never been translated into.
Yeah.
That if it doesn't happen, those people never hear the gospel.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, if it wasn't for that work, I would not be Southern Baptist.
It'd be difficult.
I would go, this fight's not worth it.
What's the alternative? Let's say that some of the naysayers are right and it splits within 10 years. Let's say we got half that want to be more liberal, half that want to be more conservative, because there is a wing within SBC that wants to be even more conservative. What does that look like? Where does that head?
I don't know.
Is it two new Baptist parties? Is it we're going to evangelical free or something like that? Or what does it look like?
I think by the nature of our convention that individual churches just have to leave. I don't think we can technically, just by the way we're designed. So we took a vote on this last week to have what they called sole membership. And what that means is that to the best of my understanding of Dr. Greenway giving this explanation, is that every messenger has the right as a seat member of every entity.
Okay.
So that me and you, for messengers that go to the convention next year, we sit as members over NAM, IMB, those things. We're part of that because we're Southern Baptists. And so because of that, it's almost impossible for us to actually have a split and say, okay, those group of people are taking IMB and those people are taking NAM. No, as a convention, we're just going to continue to vote. And if there's 47% that don't like the way things are going, they leave and they don't get anything.
Right.
They have to leave empty-handed because of the local autonomy of the church.
They keep losing money, and there might be not that much to split anyway.
There may not be hardly anything to split.
I've heard that over the years to fund the IMB, they've been selling off properties that they've owned. That's pretty much kept it afloat. I don't know if that's true or not because we can't see the financials, but that's what I've heard.
Yeah, that would be the whole open the books thing that they've been pushing for.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I would say just continue to pray for our convention, pray for the Southern Baptist Convention. If you're not a part of it, pray for it anyway. We need conservative denominations, whether it be the Great Commission Baptist, as J.D. Greer called us all this week, or it be other conservative denominations. They are in need for the gospel to continue to go forward. So continue to pray.